We don't usually begin these with a warning, but this time the word from the porch has to come with a warning that this might not be for the little ones. This is kind of a disturbing reading, and if you're used to sitting down and sharing this with your family, I might urge you to just think about it, because it might be difficult for them to understand some of these things that Jesus is going to say in our text for today. Jesus said, "I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats of this bread will live forever. And the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh." The Jews then disputed among themselves, saying, "How can this man give us his flesh to eat?" So Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood have eternal life, and I will raise them up on the last day. For my flesh is true food, and my blood is true drink. Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood abide in me, and I in them, just as the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father. So whoever eats me will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven, not like that which your ancestors ate and they died. But the one who eats this bread will live forever." He said these things while he was teaching in the synagogue in Capernaum. When many of his disciples heard it, they said, "This teaching is difficult. Who can accept it?" But Jesus, being aware that his disciples were complaining about it, said to them, "Does this offend you? Then what if you were to see the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? It is the Spirit that gives life. The flesh is useless. The words that I have spoken to you are spirit and life. But among you there are some who do not believe." For Jesus knew from the first who were the ones that did not believe and who was the one who would betray him. And he said, "For this reason I have told you that no one can come to me unless it is granted by the Father." Because of this, many of his disciples turned back and no longer went about with him. So Jesus asked the 12, "Do you also wish to go away?" Simon Peter answered him, "Lord, to whom can we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and know that you are the Holy One of God." This is a strange one. In the other Gospels, during his last meal with his disciples, Jesus added a tangible, physical dimension to the teaching in our text for today. But I don't think that is what he's doing here. Rooted in this teaching, Jesus will give us a gift that we call Holy Communion. But here in the Gospel of John, I think there are a couple of other things going on. For one, I think Jesus is pulling a Doc Berry. Doc Berry was my freshman chemistry professor at Michigan Tech. And as a newbie college kid, it seemed to me that he took a sadistic delight in weeding out students who were not serious about their studies. He actually said on the first day of class, as we sat in Fisher Hall with 150 other freshmen, "Look to your left, now look to your right." And he put on a big smile with his black tie and his wire-rimmed glasses. And he'd say, "One of the people you have just observed will not be here when this class finishes up at the end of the semester. And as much as it pains me to admit it, he was right. He made freshman chemistry a living hell, and more work than I'd done in my entire academic career up to that point. Which isn't saying all that much, I guess. Those who were not serious quit, and nobody blamed them. This is why I say Jesus was pulling a Doc Berry. Seems to me that one of the reasons he chose this weird, creepy, downright gross metaphor was to weed out the curious onlooker and his antagonists. He knew consuming blood of any kind was forbidden and horrifying to Jews. And cannibalism was even worse. And just like Doc Berry's methods, it worked. As it says in our text, a lot of his disciples just couldn't get past this strange teaching, and they bailed on him. But this isn't the most important reason he chose this strange metaphor. He also chose it because it contained essential, powerful truth that couldn't really be expressed as effectively any other way. Those who were willing to stick with him and wrestle with this strange idea would come to understand eternal, transformative truths in a way that would change them literally forever. To put it in a nutshell, what Jesus said was, "You will become what you consume, so consume me." The way John wrote his gospel has something to do with lifting up this metaphor too. There's a reason he leans on it so much harder than the other gospel writers. In the very beginning of this gospel, John says, "The Word, the very love and will of God, took on flesh and dwelt among us." John wants to make sure we understand that we need to consume the Word, consume the very love and will of God. One more detail that helped me. The word translated eat here in most English translations doesn't really cover what Jesus was trying to say. In the original language, it's not just about consuming something. The word Jesus uses here is much more about chewing or gnawing on something before you consume it, like the phrase, "Here's something to chew on." It's a whole process of thoroughly exploring and enjoying something before we swallow it and make it a part of who we are. Okay, so what do we do with this? Something I've learned over the past several months is that most of us don't really know or care or keep track of what we consume. We just kind of consume whatever we feel like. This is certainly true about literal food, a program I've been on. It requires you to keep a detailed log of everything you eat. Wow, what an eye-opener. It's even more true about spiritual and mental nutrition. We most often don't consider, even for a moment, what we are consuming. We just take in whatever we feel like, without a thought to the effect it might be having on us. We tend to teach our kids to do the same, maybe with a few more limits. Meaning no disrespect to anyone, the results of our choices in both realms are pretty obvious. People who take in good, healthy nutrition, for the most part, their bodies are much more likely to feel good and healthy. you can also clearly see what sort of spiritual and mental nutrition we have been consuming. If someone consumes a steady diet of angry, rude, self-centered ideas, what do you think they're going to be like? If someone consumes a steady diet of material that labels certain people as inferior or suspicious, how do you imagine it will impact their behavior? If someone surrounds themselves with people who show an underlying hatred for anyone who isn't like them, what impact do you imagine it will have on their life? The whole Bible makes it clear that all of these things, unrighteous anger, demeaning others, putting oneself and one's own people and interests above everyone else, it's like poisonous dew. It settles on everyone. It makes everyone miserable, but it has no staying power. In our text for today, Jesus says that He is the spiritual nutrition that lasts forever. This should come as no surprise to us. Jesus is the incarnation of God. Love itself dwells in Him. Infinite, eternal, unconditional love took on flesh in Jesus. This is what He wants us to chew on. When He talks about eating His flesh and drinking His blood, it's a powerful way of saying, consume all of me. Everything I am, everything I do, everything I say. Make it your steady diet, and you too will be transformed into the love of God in the flesh. You'll never be who Jesus was, but He's calling us to join Him on the journey, to go as far as we can as God's children. When I look at how people behave toward each other in our world, even people who claim to be followers of Jesus, it's so obvious that we are not embodying the love of God. We aren't even trying. We are putting a Jesus sticker on the other ideas and agendas we've been feasting on. But the love of God is nowhere to be seen in our words or actions too often. In our text for today, after the curious and the marginally committed had left, when Jesus finally looked at the 12 disciples He had chosen, do you remember what He asked them and what their answer was? He asked, "So, are you going to leave too?" Their answer was potent. "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life." At some level they knew. At some level they knew. You have the words of eternal life. At some level they knew. Christ's words make us Christ-like. What Christ does in us will last forever. Other people's ideas and words are attempting to do other things in us to make us into something. It's hard to know exactly what. I think I'd rather be Christ-like, wouldn't you? In Ephesians, Paul uses a metaphor that's a little less radical. Don't fill yourself up with wine. Instead, ask God to fill you with the Spirit. Different metaphor, same idea. For the sake of our souls and our nation, I think it's high time God's people started paying attention to their spiritual nutrition intake. Maybe even keep a log at first. If you're filling your head and your soul with 95% junk food designed only to make you want stuff or think what someone wants you to think, are you really okay with that? What would it look like in your life, in my life, to chew on Jesus, to make Him your primary source of spiritual nutrition? Seriously, think about it. What would it look like?
The bread of life, the true bread sent from the Father. Our ancestors ate manna in the desert, but this is the bread come down from heaven.